loving is so painful. Truly loving someone and letting that love into your heart is so painful. And that pain will expand your heart. But we don't know that. And the ego is protecting you of pain because the ego functions very simple and thinks you're going to die if you will perceive this amount of pain, which is not true. You might rebirth into a new identity, to a new version of yourself. So an old version might die that doesn't have the capacity to love this way.
Hello, Lisa. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Ostra. I'm so good. And I've been so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Since we had our first chat, thanks to Howard. It was really nice to connect with you, to learn about you and kind of your perspectives and thoughts and views, and that's really natural. Where I think it came like a natural thought of like, let's get you on a podcast and have a conversation. I want to start with question that I ask everybody as a starting off question. What is something that at some point felt impossible for you and now is your new normal?
I love the question. Honestly, my whole life. Because I live in Scandinavia, now in Sweden. Before that, I lived in Denmark. I never thought that I could be moving countries. And many people have lived somewhere, meaning they have studied somewhere else or they went for a longer vacation, but really moving countries, putting your whole residency there. Then my acting career, absolutely. I would have never thought being 18 that I'm going to be an actress and it's actually going to work. And I didn't even know about coaching. So that was something that I had even no clue that there are coaches out there and I could become one. Then the whole topic about being self-employed and so many other things. Right now I'm going to the gym. So,
Yeah.
all of that, like, whoa, that my muscles would grow in this way. I think that, I was a girl coming from a little village and my parents, I always say they're immigrants because they are. My mom came from the German-Polish border from the DDR, and my father came from Austria. We had no clue about the south of Germany, and they landed there, and they didn't speak their dialect, and my mom was in a refugee camp for 3 months. And that imprinted me also on, I think my status was more like belong and do well and get a normal job. And when my parents understood that I'm not gonna do that, I can tell you there was some friction in the house.
I can so relate to that. Actually, like most of the things that you're saying, I can so relate to that. Very similar story as in growing up, I would feel like I have to do always the right thing. I'm like doing the basketball, and I was also always like good marks and everything. And the initial thought or programming for me was get to uni, finish uni, get a job. That's kind of it. And then I learned about like when I was 12, I started to get into like psychology, mindset, and all those things, and that led me to want to study psychology. And I went to the open days in the uni, and they mentioned sports psychology there, and I was like, huh, because on the way there that day, I was thinking, how will I do sports and psychology? I literally was having that thought. I had no idea. It's a kind of like a thing that you can learn. Turns out you can't study it in Latvia. There's no program. So I was like, okay, I started to look for schools and ended up like applying for 5 schools in UK. I got accepted in 4 of them, 1 rejected, and 1 gave me kind of goal of what I need to get to with my marks in the first year of studying psychology in Latvia. And I remember thinking, even like when I would get there and I would look back, how did my parents allow me to do that? Because it was so out of norm. It was
Yeah.
so out of that kind of what you're supposed to do, that it's, and I think it's, actually, I'm curious on how did you, or if it was a thing to navigate kind of the response of people closest to you, or having that friction or having that resistance, especially with something that you know deep down inside of you that you have to do that. It's your journey.
Mhm. I was a really strong rebel all the time. So I would just rebel. And once I was 18, I knew that I can just do it because I'm 18 and no one can stop me. But it was tough, especially in times when it was tough. I remember getting started with acting and having a bar job, like acting studies. I have a diploma and I studied for 3.5 years in an acting school full time. And I had this bar job and I was searching like every morning or on a free day. I was trying to find a stipendia, that can pay me scholarship. And my teacher was like, yes, you can find it. He really gave me this. No, and it took me 6 months until I found a scholarship that can at least partwise pay my studies, and I had a job. And in this time, I didn't feel that supported by my parents, or they were actually a bit angry because I already had a bachelor in media science and I was a journalist. That was tough. I remember that because that's when you need the support the most. And I think it stuck with me because, my path is so individual and I really love to walk in the unknown and not know exactly what's going to happen. And I am a person, I would say I live outside of the box. So at this point, I am used to people saying, oh, this is weird, or even negative comments. I'm used to that. But it also takes a certain kind of thicker skin, I think, to handle that. And I accept and surrender to the fact that a part of the world is like that. And every positivity and every flame that, is other than my own flame comes to me, I really receive it. And I'm like, this is amazing that you celebrate me. And I also get a lot of compliments. And that really pushes me forward to keep going. And, as a coach, I have so many clients that I support and that I tell, look at my path so you can see that it's possible for you. And I think this is a feeling and a position that really drives me because I can help so many people to see what they can't see right now.
Walking into the unknown, and actually before that, I wanted to comment on that appreciating other people's support, because I think I heard this really interesting concept of appreciating and receiving versus expecting, where I think a lot of times we have this thought of expecting people to be a certain way, expecting people to give us certain support. And I heard this one entrepreneur talk about it, and
Well,
he was giving an example of weight loss, where he was saying that you try to lose weight, and first 5 times when you did it, people actually would support you. But then at some point, you stopped giving them reasons to support you, and they run out of that kind of support juice in some way, where you start to kind of go now in the pattern of, I will start getting my journey, but then now you get into it with this expectation of others supporting you instead of
mhm.
appreciating if they do. And I
Uh,
find it so kind of fascinating of like that dynamic, because one thing can trigger the other, and
yeah.
then it can end up being kind of like unhealthy pattern. um
I
how
found
to
two
navigate
secrets
that?
to that.
Yeah, go
I
ahead, go
found two
ahead.
secrets. So number one is to ask for what you want. So at least the people you love, you can ask them. And I practice that a lot with my family, with my parents, that I tell them what I need. I tell them in a really loving way, look, I would love for you to support me all the way. And I'm going to tell you how that looks like for me. That looks like for me is when I send you my new film, that basically you're going to freak out. Like, you're going to call me and be like, I'm the proudest mother on the planet, you know? And my parents, my mother specifically, my father is more like emotional expression, and my mother can be critical. And she's like, let me
Mm.
first see it, and then I'm going to see if I like it. And I think it's a good performance. And, you know, and I'm saying, I told my mom last time, and I think this really hit home for her. I told her, I have so many people around me that would have this reaction, that what I really, really need is people that say unconditional love. Like, I love you either way. I'm celebrating you just because you made a film, and I don't even care how you're going to do it and how it is. And I don't care if it's a horror movie or if it's shocking. I just celebrate that you are in it. Right. And I think that hit home for her to understand that there's a lot of people like that, critical people out there already, and that she doesn't need to be one more of them. And she can really turn to be my mother and my support system. And when I allowed that to express my wishes and to tell people what it is that I need, at least to people that I love, right? And as a wish of saying, I would wish for that. And also to practice that with them, to say, we're going to practice this together. And I have a family group, a WhatsApp group, and I keep sending my films and my projects to practice with them how to celebrate me, because it's easy for them, to celebrate like child pictures of the family. Oh, this cute little one. They're freaking out, literally, right? And I feel like we're getting somewhere. I really feel like they're starting to see it more, like actually what it means and to me, and maybe what an impact it has on other people and on the world, my work, you know? So that's one. And
Yeah.
the other one is just basically to practice receiving. Because in everything that people say or do, even in a critical response, there is love, because there is a person that actually like watched your content or thought about you, right? So it does come from love as well. And that, I think, is a breakthrough to understand. I'm practicing to receive it as an energetic, like a love energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's channeled into a form of critique or something, but it comes from love. It comes from, I gave this attention. I actually looked at it.
Yeah, it's a lot of that like intention behind it. I'm also like curious, how do you find the fine line between expressing your needs and having them as expectations to be met, or having it as expectation to have them met?
Look, I have this like, for myself, I have it like this. For myself, with myself, I want to have a standard of how I treat myself. And I wouldn't call it expectation. I call it like values.
Mm-hmm.
How I talk to myself, what kind of breakfast I eat, how I cook for myself. I take myself to the gym, the way I, treat my skin or whatsoever. That's values and standards that I have with myself. Then in general, I'm saying for other people, I cannot have any expectation because we never know what they're going through, but I have a standard and values for the people that are not my family, but friends that I keep in my life. So for those people, I have clear standards and values that I say a person that's in connection with me needs to be interdependent, not codependent, needs to have a healthy lifestyle. And if I observe people, especially when I get to know someone and I understand that they're not carrying this pattern that are like non-negotiables for me, then they're not going to be my closer friends.
Hmm.
This is how I handle it. And for my family, it's an exception because my family, my blood family, that's just how it is, right? They're just there how they are. And for them, I think my main North Star is to inspire them by the way that I live and the way that I love.
And that can do so much. I have seen it with my life, where I think a lot of times family can get frustrating, um, because I find it very interesting that something about the family that it is your blood, and it's something that's there no matter what. It's not like with friends, they can come and go and things like that. There's
Yeah.
something very different, like you have this very strong bond, and at the same time it teaches us a lot to accept that we can't control people, we can't change people. We can inspire them, we can influence them, but it's their
Yeah.
decision what to do or what not to do. And I have seen it in my life, how I feel like I have become so much closer to my family. And when I think about it, a lot of it did start with me working on myself, and it's kind of like it poured over into relationships with them, to the point where now it feels like it's starting to come back from them as well. And it's very interesting to see how that dynamic is changing, because it isn't something that I would have imagined years ago that I would
Yeah.
have with my family. So it's very interesting kind of to go through that process with family and see that, or practice that radical acceptance.
Absolutely. And I think it's beautiful that you say that. The first thing comes to mind for me is that I understood that my parents and our parents, they're the first people that loved us. And if this love in some way, if there was a wound, it's also the first wound ever that we get from not being loved the right way or not being loved fully. So if we repair this relationship, and if we forgive and love our parents and understand that they are also tortured by their own thinking, by the way they grew up, by their traumas, and we love them, then we repair the first wound we ever got. And what that does to the way you live and the way you perceive the world, it allows you to go back to the perception of the child when you were whole. So that's why I think repairing relationship with the parents and pouring love in and forgiving them is so powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah, there was also forgiving is a big one. And the other thing that I did, I was at one event where I realized this, where I had this like realization that I wanted to call my parents and thank them because I hadn't actually thanked them for everything that they have been doing for me
Mm,
and for my brothers. And it's I feel like there's in those moments I start to see that whoa, like there's actually so much that they have done, so much that they have sacrificed, and they didn't really get thank you for that. Or I wasn't in a space where I would think of thanking them. It's kind of like you just take it for granted. It's your parents kind of thing. Or a lot of times as kids, we always have something we don't like with our parents, or we focus on that. But then as I started to get to know my parents more as people, not just my parents, that's where I was like, whoa, I would start to have much broader perspective of them, respect them more, have more compassion, and also be like, whoa, that's impressive. Like things that you have done as like parents, like that's impressive.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was very and am very interested in who my parents were and who they like what's their persona and to encourage them also to grow. I just went on Christmas with my father to the fitness studio. For the first time in his life, he went to the fitness studio and I explained him all the machines because he really loved sports all his life. And now he's going to sign into the fitness studio.
Nice.
And I'm so proud of him. And he's 72, it's like a big thing. And I think to encourage him to grow and understand how important movement is for him and to listen to all those stories. I did actually a 4-hour interview for both of my parents where I asked them about their life and what happened in their life, which was deeply emotional and a lot of tears. But I got to know things that I will never forget for my whole life, and I got to know them so much better. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it very valuable to have those conversations. Like one thing that I think for me, a lot of it started at my grandpa's funeral because I would listen priest talk and I was like, I had no idea my grandpa had done all of these things. Also at the time I knew him only as like grandpa, so I wasn't too much into like hearing about their stories and all those things. I probably was like 18, 20 years old, something like that. So I was overconsumed with my life. But there was something about that realization that I was like, I don't want to come to another funeral of family member and have the same thought of I feel like I didn't know them fully or I didn't there's so many things that I don't know about them. And that's where like I started to have more of those conversations gradually over time where even now whenever I'm back home and I meet grandma, I hear so many different stories. And I'm like, whoa, this is so interesting. And it shows you completely different world and it even puts in your world in perspective of how
Yeah.
many things even like with all the comforts and everything that we have right now, how many things we do take for granted that my grandma, she didn't have those things.
I love to remind myself of that. My mom grew up without like chocolate and these things. And they didn't have, because in the DDR, you didn't have like real jeans. And I'm like, you didn't have jeans? I'm like, it's like incredible to me. And I love to be reminded of that. And last time I was there in Christmas, we had a longer conversation about like all the things my mom didn't have growing up in the DDR. It's blowing my mind and it shows me so much about like what her journey was. And it's a super emotional topic. I feel like I'm getting goosebumps just thinking. I love my parents so much. Like, I love them so much that I want to tell them every day how much I love them, because I know who they had to become to come to today. I know all the suffering, all the pain, and my parents, they suffered a lot. And I'm so grateful for them. And I have actually, my coach told me after many coachings, in the end of the session says, go and call your parents right now. Take the phone right now and call them and tell them that you love them. And I did. And I cried like a baby, I can tell you that. And I did that with several of my clients too, when we had a session, which then turned out to be about their parents, where I said, just call them right now. Or send them, if you can't do that, if there's such a strong boundary, send them a text. I love you. Right? And see what happens. And they told me the most beautiful things. They were like, it was such a reunion and we all cried. And so, yeah, tell them all the time, as you did. Say thank you every day. Thank you for everything that you did. And I'm not, right now not choosing to be a mother because I know what it takes of me. And I understand, you know, what they've sacrificed every single day for us. Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on connection because I think that's something that, even though we are very connected digitally and otherwise, I feel like there's a lot of connection missing, or we a lot of times can end up feeling lonely, isolated, and not understood. It's one of the, in some ways, it's a fascinating paradox, but at the same time, it seems like this kind of vicious cycle that we're in, where we try to connect without actually connecting, or even we try to connect without being vulnerable and letting people close. Can you talk on like what are some of your experiences with that, or what you have seen with people you worked with?
Yeah, so for me, Byron Katie helped me personally so much, because through Byron Katie, I understood that every time that you don't feel fulfilled by the now, by a conversation you're having, or just by being in your flat, you're resisting reality. You're resisting the present moment. You want something else, then there is. But the fact is, what is there is there. And there's no way out right now in this second, because that's what is. So resisting what is brings you into disconnection. Wanting a father that's in a commercial and that's written down in a book, oh, this is the perfect father, or I want Tony Robbins as my father, while you have your father. That's resistance to reality. And that's, if you look at it in this way, so stupid, because you can't change that. So if you get rid, and I'm telling you what that is, because that's how I perceive it, is loving is so painful. Truly loving someone and letting that love into your heart is so painful. And that pain will expand your heart. But we don't know that. And the ego is protecting you of pain, because the ego functions very simple and thinks you're going to die if you will perceive this amount of pain, which is not true. You might rebirth into a new identity, into a new version of yourself. So an old version might die that doesn't have the capacity to love this way. And then, so we protect ourselves from loving by making up stories, watching the social media and being like, oh yeah, father should act like this, and I should be loved like this, and they should treat me like that. And then when you hit reality, you think of these images and you hold on to them, you attach to them. That's a subconscious reaction of your ego, because it doesn't want to let this imperfect love in. Because your parents love you a lot, otherwise they would have never birthed you. You think any mother would go through a birth where she can literally die to birth you or me or anyone else if she wouldn't love you, if she wouldn't want you? Like, no, never. That's the moment when you decide, I don't want a child because I don't want to die. Right? And that's maybe self-love, but you get where I'm going. So I think that's creating suffering. That's what Byron Katie says. And Byron Katie goes further than that. She doesn't just say resisting reality is the only thing that creates suffering. She also says, dear God, please free me from any need for validation so I can be free. another cause for suffering is me living for wanting validation and then not getting that validation and then feeling like I'm going to die or I'm not enough or I'm worthless and disconnected and suffering and I'm alone, instead of understanding that how important it is to create a life where you don't need that external validation for anything that you do.
Love is painful. Can you talk on that? Because I don't think it's the first thought many people have when they think of love. What is that pain that it causes? Or what causes that pain?
Many poets talk about this pain. Rumi talks about this pain. Break your heart again and again until it's cracked open. Pain in society today is stamped as something negative, where pain is a part of life, and the people who can hold most pain are the most spiritual and most successful people, because they're willing and able to hold pain. And that's the people who are most embodied, who are most incarnated into this life. So poets talk about this all the time. You can, if you look into poetry, but simply to embody yourself so much to receive the pain. Like I so many hours I've been sitting and crying and weeping because I understood to fully heal, I need to let the love in. Everything I told you now, my mom birthed me because she loved me. My father was imperfect, but he loves me more than his own life. Right? Everybody who hurt me still loved me. Because you don't get a guarantee because you love someone that you will never hurt them, that you will never do them wrong. And sometimes that's also love, is to say, hey, I love you so much, I don't feel good enough for you. I'm going to let you go because I can't even love myself. All of this is still love, and it hurts. It hurts so much. So I think that one exercise of this life is truly to let love in and to really let it into your body, to have an embodied experience and to cry all those tears you need to cry. And I'm thinking a lot, because I'm also an actress, that we talk a lot about in acting, about having the capacity to hold all those emotions and colors of every human experience, a murder, a rapist, a mother, a younger character going through a really identity crisis. And I'm able to hold all of those feelings and to express them. I need immense capacity inside of me for that, to hold pain and not to crumble, not to collapse under this pain. And if we understand that this is a part of what we're here to do in this life, is to love more, to be able to expand our capacity to love and therefore to live and therefore to hold pain, which will also reconnotate what pain is for us. And we will understand pain is just a part of life, and pain is beautiful because it's full of lessons, it's full of aliveness, that every time I let it in, I feel so alive, I feel so here in the now. And then we also need to understand that your brain works against that. Your brain, your ego wants to protect you because pain, danger is I'm going to die. So if we can overcome that and get back into ownership about our own experience and say, listen, ego, listen, brain, I'm going to handle this myself because I can actually take it, right? And then we come back to practicing that, healing yourself, spending time healing, listening to a song, like talking to your parents, letting the feelings in. And I believe also really much that, because there's this trend right now about cutting off your parents and going no contact, and I heard it a lot of times now. And I believe instead, why not establish an opposite trend of starting to talk a lot with your parents? starting to ask them a lot of questions. Well, were you always able to pay your rent when I was a baby? Like, how did that go? How did you manage that? I just found out, I didn't know that my mother, because she went from the DDR and she was in a refugee camp in Germany the first 3 months, she had no clue how Western Germany worked. So when she went pregnant, like a year later, she didn't know that she can get a nurse to her home. So she figured everything out herself, and she never had a baby before. There was no Google, no cell phone, no ChatGPT. So she didn't know how to carry the baby or whatsoever. She figured everything out on her own, and she did everything on her own because she didn't even have many friends back then, because she just came there, right? So, and I didn't even know that. And that makes you love a person even more, because I think like, wow, and you didn't just do that for you, you did that for me. And I sit here today, have an amazing life because of you. And I don't know who after that story would want to go no contact. Like, I would never want to go no to contact after knowing that. But only when you make your own stories in your brain and you persist on that they are true and you never do a reality check, that's when you start to be like, oh yeah, I know how it was. It was like this and that. Again, only protection of your ego not to feel anything, not to feel the pain. Because the most painful for you, for me, was when I actually listened to my parents and understood what they went through. That was painful for me. And that caused me nightmares. And that was for me like, I didn't know how to get through that, to digest what they have been through, especially my father, you know. His father was in war when he was 13 or 14, and then he came back. No therapy, no trauma therapy, nothing. All his friends died. He almost died. You can only imagine, like, what version of himself came back to my father when he was 2 years old. And to understand that and digest that for myself, that was painful. Because I cannot take this pain away from him ever. And I want that because I love him so much.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful explanation. With that first step of letting love in, where to start, how to do that if it's so unfamiliar, if it's so scary, if it's so uncomfortable, where to start? How does that look like?
Hmm. I love that you say that, because it is scary for so many people. And it is something that your brain tells you, our brain tells us we cannot do that. So for me, first, it starts with awareness. I have a brain, and my brain right now is telling me a lot of stories. That's going to be so painful. That's going to kill me. I can never do that. I'm not ready for that. I don't know how to, I don't want that. And then take all these stories and put them maybe in a journal, yeah? And to look at them and just see, okay, that's all the stories that I have about it. And then coming back to reality, where I maybe sit here on this chair on the table and understand that I haven't been letting more love in. So I don't know how it will feel. So can I open a new version of that story where I'm saying, well, I don't know how it's going to be. You, brain, tell me it's going to be frightening and scary. It's going to be horrible. But let's open up a new opportunity that I just don't know how it's going to be. Maybe it will be even worse than you say. Maybe it will be much better than you said. And then I think it's a lot about educating yourself and listening to people who have healed and who are loving it a lot. And I think it's really important to find your people, to find your coach, your spiritual teacher, your healer, where you say, this is the person for me, because they went through it and they're doing really good, right? They're radiant. They are on the other side. And to see that and understand, okay, so they've done the work and they are financially abundant. They look amazing. They say a lot of amazing stuff. So the outcome of what we're about to dive in seems really, really good. And then another aspect is you don't have to do it alone. And I could have never done that amount of healing alone without my coaches, without some coaching groups and communities I was in, without some retreats I went to, trauma retreats, community retreats, I couldn't have done that. So don't even start to think that you need to do it alone. Because you don't. And you don't have to. You're going to find your people and you're going to ask for help, and that's going to change your life.
And it doesn't make you weak asking for it.
No. And the more you're stuck, the more trauma you have, the more blocked you are, the more scared you are, the harder it is to do the first step that I shared of taking these stories and understanding that they are not you. So the more contracted, the more blocked, the more shock is in your nervous system, the harder it is to understand that your essence is not affected. So that's why you need someone else. You need a mirror, right? To mirror you and to give you hope and to give you that and say there is another way. And I remember that in a really tough time, my coach needed to scream at me a few times, a few sessions. Really scream at me like, Lisa, stop it, right? And I needed that. I was like, oh my God, you're correct. Like, you're right. I mean, like, and my coach even told me, like, if you're going to tell this story of suffering and this bullshit, she called it, one more time, it's over. I'm not going to coach you anymore. That's it. I'm not going to listen to the same story again. And because at this point, I already liked her so much and I knew she was right, I started to ask myself, who would I be without that story of my suffering? And I actually really liked the version that I would be without. And even if I didn't believe at this point that I could be without this story and I could be someone else, I trusted her more and I wanted this connection with my coach more than I wanted to stay where I am and always repeat like a vinyl, repeat the same tune.
That is a very interesting question about who would I be without my suffering? Because I think a lot of times we get so attached to it that I had this one I saw this one documentary where there was one person who was healing people from chronic pain. And there was such a powerful scene where there was one person who was like crying and in pain and the person would tell them to let it go and they would tell, I can't. And the healer would ask why. And they're like, I don't know who I am without the pain.
Exactly.
That
is the key. That is the key. It's how much you identify with the pain, with the story, with the suffering. And I think we already nailed it, you and me, because even when we talked about our parents and we said, instead of going no contact, go into connection, start to communicate, to ask questions, to talk, and it will change the story.
Yeah.
But we know Byron Katie talks about this too. She says the brain wants a full loop of story so it can settle on something because it wants to build an identity. So, and what the brain does, Byron Katie says that is that if the story is not 100% closed, then the brain will fill a lie so that the story is 100% closed and you can build an identity. And people in suffering have created a super negative story and then pushed an even more negative lie on it so that everything makes sense and they can be the full victim of the story.
Without knowing as well.
Without knowing, it's subconscious. And to get aware of that and then to say identity is just a construction that my brain makes to keep me safe. And if you don't want that identity, and if it doesn't, let's say like this, if it doesn't serve you, because it gets you pain, even physical pain, emotional pain, it doesn't get you the outcome you want on your bank account, whatever it is in your love life, then change the story. And what was really important for me, and it's really important for the work with my clients too, is it's not the feeling first. You don't need to feel amazing first to start the journey. You're going to tell yourself, I am a superhero. I'm healing right now. I'm starting over today. Right now is a new moment for me. And then after some time, can be weeks, can be months, could be even 2 years, depending on how in shock your nervous system is. And the more regulated you get, you're starting to feel more. And you will start to get excited and you will start to feel joy again and you will start to feel safe again. But the biggest mistake people make is thinking, I need to be fine first. No, You need to talk sense into your brain by saying, I am safe. I am in peace right now. I am capable of handling whatever is in front of me. And then comes the confidence as a result, as an echo of that. And because we're so wired to consume, so we're so wired on getting the feeling first, getting the phone, and I get automatically a dopamine push. Wow, someone wrote me, right? And I don't need to do really much for that. I just grab my phone. But building a new identity and building a different life, creating a different story takes way more effort than that. Because everything needs to rewire. Even the cells in your body, your organs restructure, your digestion changes, your regulation changes. You're creating a new neural pathway of thinking in your brain. That's not done 2 times and then it's done and you feel the result and you feel amazing.
Yeah, this reminds me of this this like kind of golden nugget that I heard, that the life you have today is a result of decisions you made for the last 6, 12 months, whatever is the case, where a lot of times there's this delay effect where we think that the moment I start to do this thing, I have to have result instantly. But a lot of times you need to plant the seeds first and trust that they're growing. And then at one point it will click, it will start to show up and you will start to see it. Even when it comes to being more regulated, being healthier, having less unhealthy patterns or behaviors, it doesn't happen overnight, but I think it can be very discouraging at the initial phase of trying to change yourself and your life, where you put in the work, you do all the right things, but you don't see the result, and you start to think something must be wrong with me, I'm doing something wrong, it doesn't work for me. But a lot of it is that we just haven't given it enough time, we haven't trusted it long enough. And it is a very tricky kind of phase to navigate because it can get very discouraging.
Yes, and that's why a mentor or a coach or a trainer you look up to is extremely important,
Yes.
because that's a person that stayed consistent and has the outcome you want and can motivate you every day. And you also see, oh, it's possible because that other person did it too.
Yeah.
I chose my coach and it was like, she's successful coach. She's happily married. She loves her husband. Her husband loves her. She has what I want. So that's the person I'm choosing. And I will tell you, she didn't just get it like that. She was also going through a lot to get there and many setbacks, but she can tell me about all this. My coach always said, if you engage with a coach and you enroll with a coach, you don't have to pay the price that they had to pay to get where you want to be. It's not going to be that painful because they failed for you. They fell for you. They did a financial mistake for you. And you will not have to do it. And that's what you pay for. You pay for less pain, right? And I think that's the one thing. And then I also want to shortly just mention, I think responsibility we have when we as coaches and people who got there promote ourselves to check in with an image of reality. So it's important that we also share moments of struggle, that we share how we got there, and we share a realistic picture of what's actually happening. Because that's something that's disturbing me a lot, is the perfection that I see everywhere. And I'm like, this is not true. And what I really like to do when I do social media videos is like use no makeup, or just put myself, just did that in front of my house in the snow with some sun and just film myself and talk, because this is my life. I had this call with you 10 minutes later. This is real. This is really happening. I had my winter jacket on. There's no fake in that. That's happening. So we need transparent mentors and coaches. And my coach was an amazing one. And I also share a lot of defeats with my clients where I said, this happened to me 20 times. And before I got any acting jobs through phone calls and emails, you know what happened? For 3 years, nothing happened. I got no emails. I got no callbacks, nothing. And I almost wanted to give up until it started to happen and people called me and gave me emails. And I had to put in this work for people to start to remember me.
Yeah, it is a Literally, before you added about the support, I was about to say that like one of the shortcuts to that is to get support, is to get help, is to get some people that can not only support you but also keep you accountable, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Before you ask you the last question, where can people connect with you, learn about you, and what you do?
I think best is over Instagram. Just my name, Lisa Riesner, and then /official. I also have a website, so just www.lisariesner.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page. I'm really present on social media, so you can find me there. And right now, we also have a film, Mother, that you can vote for and watch, and we can win a Danish award. So please do that. If you see this interview and you got
Yeah.
until the end, there's a link. Mother Mor in Danish. It's with English subtitles, and we would
It
really,
is very
really
interesting.
love
I
your
did watch it.
support. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very nice. Last question I have for you. What is the impossible you're chasing now?
Exciting. I'm working towards the healthiest and fittest version of myself. So, nutrition, muscles, everything. Also, inner values, boundaries, all of that. And then, helping as many people as possible. People need help, and I'm here to help. So, as many people as I can help, the better. So, that's my vision. And is that through acting, through coaching, through just carrying someone's grocery bags in the supermarket who's like an old lady? I don't care.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. Well, Lisa, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed
Thank
that
you so much. It went so
conversation.
fast.
Yeah, I know.
Incredible.
And everybody, go check out the mother and leave your votes so that we can support Lisa on her actress journey as well.
Thank you so much, Ostra, and I can't wait to see you again.